The call came in just after 9 on a wet March night, the kind that turns New York into a city of blurred lights and bad decisions. I was halfway through a stale coffee and a stack of paperwork that had nothing to do with murder and even less to do with justice when my desk phone rang. Not my cell. Not the bullpen line. My desk phone. That alone told me somebody wanted my attention, not my convenience. I picked up on the second ring. Harker. A pause. Wind on the other end. Then a man's voice, clipped, official, trying too hard to sound steady. Detective Harker, this is Lieutenant Alan Pierce, Suffolk County. We've got a dead man in the keeper's quarters at Black Harbor Light. I leaned back in my chair and looked through the glass wall of my office at the restless movement of the squad room outside. Detectives drifted between desks under fluorescent lights, collars open, tempers short. The city never really slept. It just grew meaner after dark. What makes you think I need to hear about it? Another pause. The room was locked from the inside, Pierce said. The victim's got a gun beside him. Local read is suicide. He lowered his voice. But the scene doesn't feel right. And there's something else. The light went dark for 7 minutes before he died. That got my attention. I watched a patrol report flutter beneath the breath of the ceiling vent and felt the old shift happen in my head. That quiet click when a case moves from background noise to focus. What's the victim's name? Elias Rowe. 52. Civilian lighthouse keeper. Former Coast Guard. Who asked for me? You did, came a woman's voice from my doorway. I turned and found Donna Flynn leaning against the frame in a dark fitted coat, rain still silvering the shoulders. She carried no umbrella. Donna never carried anything she considered unnecessary, including false reassurance. Shoulder-length brown hair, green eyes that missed less than they let on, expression composed enough to make liars nervous before she spoke a word. Pierce was still talking in my ear, but I was already watching her. How did you know? I asked. Donna crossed the room, held out her hand, and I gave her the receiver. Lieutenant, she said. Donna Flynn. A brief silence. Yes, that Donna Flynn. Good. Then we can skip the part where you pretend this is routine. She listened, eyes on me the whole time. Donna had a way of doing that, making even silence feel like evidence. She handed me the receiver back. He's leaving out the useful part. I put Pierce on speaker. Try me. A scrape of static. Rowe called Harbor Dispatch at 1:13 a.m. said he thought someone was using the shoals to run signals offshore. Signals, I repeated. Light flashes. Not from the tower. From below the cliff, maybe. He sounded agitated. Dispatcher told him to sit tight and wait for county marine support. But by the time the deputy and coast unit got there, the lantern room was dark, the keeper's quarters were bolted, and Rowe was dead. Donna moved to my desk and glanced at the photos pinned on the board behind me, though I knew she wasn't really seeing them. She was building the victim already, sketching him from tone, sequence, stress. Who found him, she asked. Deputy Sloan and a maintenance tech. They forced the door. Anyone else inside before them? I said, no. Donna gave me a look that meant maybe, not no. I stood, grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, and shut the case file in front of me without bothering to mark my place. We're coming out. Pierce exhaled audibly. Roads are bad. I'm from New York, I said. Bad roads are a civic tradition. I hung up and slipped the phone back into its cradle. Donna was already reaching for the folder tray on the corner of my desk, where she'd found a pad and started writing names in her neat, precise hand. Talk to me, I said. Gladly. She didn't look up. Former Coast Guard means disciplined, practical, probably not impulsive. A man like that calls dispatch because he sees a pattern, not because he spooks at shadows. If he believed someone was signaling offshore, then he'd likely noticed it before tonight. You're already arguing homicide. I'm arguing intent. She tore the page free and handed it to me. And I'm arguing he knew enough to be dangerous to somebody. I looked at the list. Victim habits, recent complaints, maintenance logs, harbor traffic, dispatch audio, financial pressure, last visitor. Who benefits if the lighthouse goes blind? That was Donna. I looked at the room. She looked at the people who moved through it, the invisible pressure points, the reason somebody lied 2 beats too late. 10 minutes later we were in my car heading east through rain that hit the windshield in hard diagonal lines. Queens gave way to stretches of slick highway, then black water glimpsed between bare trees, then long coastal roads bordered by marsh grass bent flat in the wind. Donna sat beside me with the case notes open on her lap, one boot tucked under the other leg, reading the initial incident report by the glow of the dashboard. Roe was divorced, she said. One daughter in Boston. Clean employment record. No priors, no known debts. He filed 2 maintenance complaints in the last month. About the light? No. About unauthorized access to service levels. I glanced at her. That missing from Pierce's charming summary? Completely. She turned a page. Also missing. One of the deputies noted the victim looked surprised. I snorted. That's not a note. That's a ghost story. Not if everyone else expected grief or pain and one person saw fear. She shut the folder. People notice more than they understand. Rain hissed under the tires. Ahead of us the road narrowed, bending along the coast where the Atlantic pressed itself against rock in slow, black violence. The lighthouse appeared without warning, a pale column on a dark bluff, the lantern extinguished against the weather. Even from a distance it didn't look abandoned. It looked watchful. Structures like that collect history the way old men collect grudges. The access road was lined with county vehicles, their light bars pulsing red and blue over wet stone and grass. Beyond them the sea moved under the cliff in white bursts and shadow. I parked. Wind hit the car hard enough to rock it once. Donna buttoned her coat all the way to the throat. You know what I hate about lighthouses? You hate most architecture. I hate isolated architecture, she said. It always comes with secrets and bad insulation. I almost smiled. We got out into the cold. Lieutenant Pierce met us halfway to the entrance, shoulders hunched against the weather. Mid-40s, broad face, hair already giving up on him. Tired eyes. Good cop, maybe. Nervous enough to call outside help, which counted in his favor. Harker. Flynn. He shook our hands in quick succession. Thanks for coming. Give me the version you'd put in your report, I said. Then the version you'd tell yourself if you wanted to sleep tonight. Pierce rubbed rain from his jaw. Officially, victim appears to have died from a penetrating wound to the chest. A revolver was recovered beside the body. Door was bolted from the inside. Window latched. No one seen entering or leaving. And unofficially, he looked up toward the tower. Nothing about it sits right. That, at least, was honest. He led us inside. The base of the lighthouse smelled of salt, wet metal, and old paint. The stairwell spiraled upward through concrete and shadow, the sound of the sea following us between the walls like breath in a throat. My hand slid over the iron rail as we climbed, feeling grit, damp, the slight stick of neglected maintenance. Halfway up, Donna touched my sleeve. I stopped. What? She tilted her head toward the air. Perfume. Pierce frowned. What? She ignored him and inhaled again, faintly. Not fresh. Floral. Mixed with lamp oil or machine grease. I caught it then. Barely. Something sweet under the industrial smell, out of place in a structure built for function and weather. Who's been in here? I said. Pierce spread a hand. Deputies. County medical examiner. Maintenance supervisor. Me. Any of them wearing perfume? Not unless Sloane's got a secret life. Donna kept climbing, but I knew that look. She'd filed the scent away under not evidence yet. The keeper's quarters were one level below the lantern room. A uniform stood outside the damaged door. The frame had been split near the lock, fresh wood pale against old paint. Inside, the room was small, circular, and spare. Bed against the wall, narrow desk, stove, shelves, emergency radio, coat hook, mug half full of cold coffee. And on the floor beside the bed lay Elias Rowe. He was on his back, head turned slightly toward the window, as if he'd heard something at the last second and never got time to answer it. The revolver rested near his right hand. Too near. The chest wound had soaked his shirt dark, but not in the pattern I would have expected from a close gunshot. I stood just inside the threshold and let the room settle around me. A scene talks if you don't interrupt it. The first thing I noticed was the gun. The second was the absence of what should have come with it. No heavy blowback staining on the shirt. No obvious burn pattern. No shattered geometry that matched a panicked self-inflicted shot at close range. The third thing was smaller. Grains of pale sand on the inside sill of the window. Donna moved left, slowly, taking in the room the way some people read faces in a crowd. Pierce started to say something, but I raised a hand. Not yet. I crouched near the body. Rowe's eyes were half open. His face wasn't peaceful. It wasn't resigned either. It held the last hard trace of a man who had seen something impossible a second before it happened. I looked at the revolver, then at his hand. "No powder stippling," I said quietly. Pierce shifted. "Me mentioned that. And still left the gun where it could tell the story for you." I leaned closer to the wound. "Small entry. Tight. Wrong shape. Not a bullet," I said. The room went still. Pierce blinked. "What?" Donna stepped to the desk and turned the logbook toward the light from her phone. "Adrian." I went to her. The entries were neat until they weren't. Midnight inspection. Wind east-northeast. Visibility poor. Lens clear. Then, at 1:07 a.m. Intermittent flash below East Shoal. At 1:11. Not from channel marker. And the last line, written harder, the pen digging into the paper as if the writer had been standing, not sitting. "Someone is." Nothing after that, but a dragged line of ink. I stared at it for a second longer than I meant to. Donna touched the bottom corner of the page. "He didn't finish because he heard something," she said. "Or someone." I looked at the clock on the shelf. It had stopped at 1:14. Pierce swallowed. Dispatch call was 1:13. "Then he made the call," I said. "Came back in here, started to write, and got interrupted." My eyes moved to the door bolt. Heavy steel. Old, but functional. Thrown into place. Locked room. Except most locked rooms aren't impossible. They're only arranged to look that way. I crossed to the window. Narrow opening. Storm latch engaged, but not cleanly. There was play in it. Less than a quarter inch. Enough for movement. Enough for tampering. Below, through streaked glass, the rocks glistened black under the cliff. Beyond them the sea rolled in restless bands of ink and foam. "Behind me," Donna said, "this wasn't suicide." Pierce gave a humorless laugh. "You two always this fast?" "No," she said. "Sometimes people try harder." I looked down at the floor near the bed and saw a crumb of yellowed wax pressed into the seam between two boards. Then I noticed the smell again. Sweet. Floral. Wrong. And just like that, the whole case shifted. A dead keeper. A darkened light. False signals offshore. A staged suicide in a sealed room. I straightened slowly and looked at Pierce. "Seal the tower," I said. "No one in, no one out. I want the dispatch recording, harbor traffic, maintenance access, and every name tied to this place in the last 30 days. Pierce nodded at once. Donna was still studying the unfinished sentence in the logbook. "What is it?" I asked. She looked at me, green eyes steady and unreadable. "He knew whoever came into this room," she said. "Or he recognized what they were doing." Her gaze shifted toward the window, the dark sea beyond it. "Either way, he died before he could finish the truth." Outside, somewhere below us, a wave struck the rocks hard enough to make the tower tremble. I stood in the keeper's quarters, listening to the storm claw at the stone, and had the distinct feeling that the lighthouse was not guarding the coast tonight. It was guarding a secret. Pierce moved fast once he had orders, which I appreciated. A lot of cops hear certainty in another man's voice and decide they resent it. Pierce heard it and treated it like a rope thrown across bad water. Within 10 minutes, he had one deputy locking down the base of the tower, another collecting names, and the county me taking a second, less complacent look at Elias Rowe's body. Donna stayed by the desk while I worked the room one more time. That was our rhythm. I looked for what had happened. She looked for what it meant. "Who found the body first?" I asked. Pierce nodded toward the hall. "Deputy Sloan. Maintenance tech named Neil Carver was with him. Bring them up one at a time." He stepped out. I took another slow turn around the quarters. The bed was narrow, military neat except where death had interrupted it. The stove was cold. The mug on the shelf had a tan crescent of dried coffee inside it. Beside the logbook sat a pen, uncapped, and a flashlight with salt dust in the grooves. Rowe had expected to keep working. People planning to die don't usually leave themselves mid-task. Donna was kneeling by the shelf unit now, not touching anything, just studying the arrangement. "He was orderly," she said. "So far that covers every lighthouse keeper in the Western Hemisphere." "No," she glanced at me. "Orderly under pressure. There's a difference." I waited. She pointed with two fingers, careful not to disturb anything. "The emergency radio is charged. Spare batteries lined up by age. Tools grouped by use, not size." He wasn't just neat. He was compensating for risk. Men who work alone build rituals because rituals create control. I looked at the interrupted log entry again. Meaning if he thought he was losing control of this place, it would have bothered him long before tonight. The deputy came in on cue. Sloan was younger than I expected, late 20s maybe, broad across the shoulders, still carrying that clean-edged look some cops lose after their first few ugly years. Rain glistened in his short blonde hair. He kept looking at the body and then away from it, as if his mind hadn't agreed with his eyes yet. "You looked through the window before forcing the door?" I said. "Yes, sir." "What exactly did you see?" "Victim on the floor beside the bed. Gun near his hand. Lamp on. Window shut. No movement." "How was the door?" "Bolted. We hit it twice with a maintenance ram from downstairs." "Who touched what?" "Me, Carver, Lieutenant Pierce after we called it in." I checked for pulse. Carver moved the gun away from Rose's fingers with a rag because he thought. He stopped. "Thought what?" "That maybe it'd go off." "Did it?" "No." I let that sit there a second. "Did anything strike you as odd?" He hesitated, which made Pierce tense in the doorway. Donna stepped in before either of us could push too hard. "Deputy, when you first saw him, what was the feeling in the room?" He looked at her, confused by the question, then answered before he could censor himself. "Wrong." "Wrong how?" "Not sad." His face tightened. "I know how that sounds." "It sounds honest," Donna said. Sloan swallowed. It didn't feel like suicide. It felt like somebody had stopped something. Like he'd been interrupted. I watched Donna file that away without looking pleased. She didn't collect intuition as proof. She collected it as direction. "Anything else?" I asked. He thought. "Smell." Pierce frowned. "You didn't put that in your report." I didn't know what to call it. Sloan looked embarrassed now. "Sweet maybe. Not strong." I noticed it when I leaned in by the desk. Donna's eyes met mine for a fraction of a second. "Where's Carver?" I said. The maintenance tech came in a minute later. Neil Carver was in his 40s, narrow-faced, wind-burned, with hands so cracked they looked sculpted out of driftwood. He wore a county facilities jacket and carried his nerves badly. Not guilt exactly. More the anxiety of a man used to machinery, because machinery made sense. I asked him to walk me through the morning. He did, with the careful precision of someone who trusted sequence more than memory. He and Sloan had come up after a circuit fault alert when the lantern dipped. They got no answer from Roe. Sloan looked through the glass. They forced the door. Roe was down. Gun by the hand. Bolt thrown. End of story. Except it wasn't. "What did you touch in here?" I said. "Door. Gun with a rag. Clock maybe." He rubbed his palm over his jaw. "And the lantern controls upstairs." "Why?" "Because the light had glitched." Define glitched. 7-minute interruption in the rotation sequence. Not a full outage. More like a series of irregular eclipses. Donna stood. Carver saw her movement and rushed to clarify. "I mean, that's what the remote log looked like. Flickers. Missed throws. Maybe a mechanical hitch." "Maybe," I said. "And upstairs." He nodded too quickly. I checked the lens assembly. "Governor. Fuel line. Service rail. Everything normal?" "No." The room went very still. Carver licked his lips. There was a warm spot. "Where?" He pointed upward. Backside of the service housing under the lantern platform. Metal should have been cold by then except near the active line. But one section on the rear plate was warmer than the rest. Like friction? Maybe. Or pressure. Something resting against it. He looked miserable now. I didn't think it mattered. Guy was dead on the floor. "It matters," I said. Donna moved closer to him, voice lower. "Did Roe trust you?" Carver blinked. "I guess." "That isn't what I asked." He looked at the body, then at the floorboards. "He trusted me with the equipment," he said quietly. "Not with people." "What people?" "I don't know." "You do." Donna said, not sharply, just cleanly. Carver's throat worked. Past month or so, he kept asking for extra maintenance logs. Sign-in sheets. Said someone had been in restricted levels off schedule. He finally looked up. I told him I couldn't prove that. "But you believed him." Carver nodded once. "Why didn't you put that in writing?" He laughed without humor. "Because county hates ghosts in the machinery." That I believed. I had Pierce take both men downstairs and keep them separate. Then Donna and I climbed to the lantern room. The stairs tightened as they rose, the air turning colder, then warmer again near the top where machinery held its own little climate against the storm. The lantern chamber was all curved glass and metal geometry, the beam turning slow and patient through the rain. Outside, the Atlantic kept throwing itself at the rocks like it had a personal grievance. I crouched near the rear service plate Carver had indicated. At first I saw nothing but old bolts, grease, salt bloom. Then I found the scrape. Fresh. Thin. Right against oxidized brass. Not random wear. A line, shallow but deliberate, at the edge of a bracket where something narrow had been fixed and then removed. Adrian, Donna said softly. She was at the inner rail, fingertips hovering over a darker smear no wider than a thumbnail. Oil maybe. Or soot. She brought her hand near her face and stopped short of touching it. Same sweet note, she said. Only weaker. I followed the line of the rail, then down beneath the platform where the service cavity narrowed into shadow. There was just enough space to conceal a mechanism if somebody had time, access, and nerve. Someone used the light, I said. Donna looked out through the glass toward the headland below us. No, she said. Someone spoke through it. That was the kind of thing I would never say out loud, and exactly why I needed her around. We spent another 20 minutes up there, mapping what we could without dismantling anything. I wanted county forensics on the bracket, the rail, the service plate, the whole damn tower. I also knew if I waited for lab work alone, the tide would erase half the case. When we came down, Pierce met us at the landing with a file folder and an expression that said the night was getting worse in useful ways. Rose address, he said. Cottage half a mile down the cliff road. Also got this from dispatch. He handed me a printout. 2 prior calls from his line in the last 3 weeks. Both logged as possible visual anomalies offshore. No response unit sent. Why not? He grimaced. One got coded weather interference. The other got closed as equipment malfunction. Donna took the sheet from me. Convenient. Welcome to county, Pierce said. I gave him 2 uniforms and told him to keep the tower frozen exactly as it was. Then Donna and I took flashlights and headed out along the cliff path toward Rose Cottage. The rain had eased into mist. The wind came hard off the water, flattening the grass and carrying that raw mineral smell the ocean gets when it wants you to remember how old it is. The lighthouse beam swept over us every few seconds, pale and mechanical, like the eye of something too large to care whether we lived. You think the killer came from below? I said. I think Rose's attention was divided, Donna answered. The unfinished sentence says interruption. The fear on his face says recognition or shock. The staged gun says premeditation. That narrows it to murder. It narrows it to someone who needed the room to lie after he was dead. I like that. Didn't make me happier, but I liked it. The cottage stood in a fold of land just off the road, dark and low, with a small porch facing the sea. No lights. A shell path led to the door. Garden beds on both sides, winter dead and neatly bordered. I paused at the gate. A footprint had collected water in the soft ground beside the path. Not Rose. His boots at the scene had broad service treads. This print was narrower, cleaner at the edge, with an odd double nick at the heel where the rubber had split or been cut. You see it, Donna said. I see one print. You see a person who wants to arrive without announcing themselves. I followed the path with my light. 2 more impressions, faint but there. Same heel damage. Same inward angle on the right foot. Someone careful. Someone not local enough to the terrain to move naturally over mud and shell. The front door was locked. Pierce had given me the key from Rose Effects. Inside, the cottage smelled like clean laundry, old books, and the faint medicinal trace of aftershave. Order again, but a warmer version than the tower. Framed photos on the wall. A younger Roe in Coast Guard uniform. A woman with him in one picture, not in the rest. A college-age girl at what looked like a graduation. Books on coastal history. Navigation manuals. A stack of repair invoices held together with a binder clip. Donna moved through the room with that quiet, respectful focus she reserved for the dead and the damaged. What do you have? I asked. Divorce that stayed civil. She indicated the photographs. A daughter he was proud of. No collapse spiral. No signs of self-neglect. No drinking nest. No debt panic in plain view. I was already at the small desk by the window, opening drawers one at a time. Bills. Utility statements. Harbor maps. Then a folded page waited beneath a ceramic mug. I opened it carefully. It wasn't a suicide note. It was a list. Dates. Times. Tide conditions. Brief entries in Rose's blocky handwriting. 1:32 a.m. Low glimmer East Shoal 12:48 a.m. 2 flashes below cliff line fog heavy, / no vessel visible not from buoy not from tower sequence. At the bottom, underlined twice. If anything happens, check maintenance access. I read it once, then handed it to Donna. Her expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. He knew he was being cornered. Or thought he was. No, she held up the paper. This is a man trying to leave instructions without sounding afraid. I went still. That was exactly right. Not fear written out. Fear controlled, compressed into procedure. I searched the rest of the desk and found a maintenance badge log with 2 entries circled in red. Both after hours. Both signed with initials instead of names. NC on one, MB on the other. Carver, I said. Maybe, Donna said. Or someone using his access pattern. I turned the page over. On the back, almost too faint to see, someone had pressed hard enough with another sheet to leave an impression in the paper beneath. I angled it toward the lamp. The words surfaced a piece at a time. Meet below the rocks alone. No signature. Outside, a wave hit hard enough that the window rattled. I looked out toward the black stretch beneath the cliff where the beam passed, and passed again. They drew him out, I said. Donna came to stand beside me. Or tried to. He may have gone. He may have refused. Either way, the meeting mattered. She was looking not at the sea, but at the reflection in the glass, as if she could see the dead man in the room behind us. He'd been carrying this by himself for weeks, she said. You can feel it. I folded the note and put it in an evidence sleeve. Then tomorrow morning, I said, we go below the rocks. Donna nodded. No, she said after a beat. We go before morning. I turned to her. The tide. She shook her head. Because if someone called him down there last night, they may come back tonight to see what the sea didn't finish. That was all I needed. We killed the cottage lights, locked up, and headed back into the wind with our flashlights cutting short white tunnels through the mist. The lighthouse beams swept over the path again, then moved on, as indifferent as ever. By the time we reached the turn toward the bluff, I could already hear the surf more clearly below us. It had changed pitch. Not louder. Closer. As if the dark under the cliff had been waiting all night for us to come ask the right question. The path down to the rocks wasn't a path so much as a concession. A narrow break in the cliff grass dropped between slick stone and scrub, steep enough to make a sane man reconsider his priorities and a detective check the battery life on his flashlight. The beam from Black Harbor lights swept over the slope at long intervals, bleaching everything silver for a second at a time before the dark folded back in. Donna went first. I didn't like that, but Donna had a better center of gravity than I did and none of my patience for masculine symbolism. She moved carefully, one hand on the wet stone, coat close to her body, boots testing each foothold before trusting it. Try not to break your neck, I said. Her voice drifted back through the wind. I was about to say the same thing, but with more accuracy. The surf hammered below us, loud enough to feel in my ribs. Halfway down I caught the smell again, or thought I did. Salt first. Kelp. Wet mineral. Then, underneath it, that same wrong sweetness from the tower. Faint, unstable, gone before I could be sure. When I reached the bottom, the rocks stretched out in broken shelves slick with black water and weed. The sea came in hard through narrow gaps, exploded white, then dragged itself back in long angry breaths. Above us the cliff rose like a wall, and the lighthouse turned slowly against the clouds. This was where you came if you wanted to be unseen from the road. Not from the sea, though. That mattered. I played my light low across the stones. Char marks showed up almost immediately, not fresh but not old enough for the tide to have erased them. A rough ring of scorched driftwood sat tucked into the lee of 2 larger outcrops, sheltered from the wind and invisible from the bluff unless you knew exactly where to look. There, Donna said quietly. She was already crouching beside the remains of the fire. Wax had run over the stone in yellowed streaks. Cheap candles by the look of them, shoved into cracks in the rock and burned down fast. One had been snapped off near the base. Another had collapsed sideways and fused to the surface in a pale, ugly ribbon. I touched none of it. False light, I said. Not just false, Donna said. Personal. I looked at her. She gestured toward the arrangement. Whoever did this wanted control, but also ritual. Same kind of cheap wax. Same scent marker. Repetition matters to some people. It makes them feel invisible and special at the same time. I scanned the stones around the fire circle. That's one way to say unhinged. That's one way to avoid saying organized. Fair point. A few feet beyond the ash, I found a darker stain on the rock where oil had been spilled or dripped, protected from the rain by a natural lip of stone. Not much. Enough to feed a lantern or prime a flame. Enough to make a signal brighter than candlelight alone. I stood and traced the sight line out toward the water. From here, just beyond the east shoal, a captain in fog or heavy weather might read a light wrong if he wanted a reason to trust it. Or if he was desperate enough. The sea doesn't have to fool you on its own. Men are usually willing to help. Donna was studying the sand patch farther up the cove where the tide had only partly reached. Adrian. I joined her. Footprints, faint but legible. One set broad and deep, likely work boots. Another narrower, cleaner at the heel. Same damaged split at the back edge I'd seen by Rose Cottage. The prince approached the fire circle, turned, then headed toward the base of the cliff where the rock face opened into a narrow cut of shadow. Someone's been using more than the beach, I said. Donna angled her flashlight into the dark gap. Looks like a storage cleft. It was. Not a cave, exactly. More a natural recess where the cliff folded inward just enough to hide a body, a bag, or a secret. I ducked inside, shoulders brushing damp stone, beams skating over slick walls and heaps of storm-thrown debris. Then the light caught canvas. A tarred duffel bag had been shoved behind a broken timber and half covered with weed. I felt the old tightening in my chest that comes when evidence stops being theoretical. Don't touch it yet, Donna said. I wasn't going to. That's a lie. It's an investigative urge. Still a lie. I crouched and looked more closely. The canvas was stiff with salt. One corner had torn away, leaving frayed threads at the edge. I thought of the tiny fiber I'd noticed in the tower, caught between floorboards near Rose's bed. Not proof yet, but close enough to feel the case turning under my hands. I used my pen to lift the flap. Inside, 3 cheap yellow candles, 2 wrapped in newspaper, a dark glass bottle half full of perfumed oil, a compact hand lantern with 1 shutter panel rigged to slide, and a length of narrow metal rod no longer than my forearm, 1 end sharpened, the other fitted with a crude spring collar. For a second I just stared at it. Not because I didn't understand. Because I did. Donna saw it the same instant. Jesus. The rod lay there with all the indifference in the world, like a tool after work. Not a bullet. Not a knife. Something meant to be launched or driven with force from close range. Slender enough to leave the kind of wound I'd seen in Rose's chest. Small enough to hide. Mechanical enough to appeal to a mind that liked solutions more than mess. I let out a slow breath. Someone built the locked room, I said. Donna's voice was steady, but I could hear the anger under it now. And practiced it. I looked again at the shuttered lantern. It wasn't just a light source. It was a signaling device. Open, close, open, close. Cheap, portable, and controlled. The kind of thing you use if you want to imitate coded flashes from a place nobody should be standing. Below the cliffs. Beneath the official light. A counterfeit truth. I was bagging the scene in my mind, working sequence and access, when Donna went still beside me. Not freeze. Still. It's different. Don't move, she said. I listened. At first I heard only the surf. Then, above it, loose grit shifting somewhere higher on the slope. Somebody was up there. I killed my flashlight. Donna did the same. Darkness slammed in hard and complete, broken only when the lighthouse beams swept across the cove and moved on again. We pressed ourselves into the recess and waited. Another sound. Careful. Too careful. Whoever it was had either seen our lights from above or come down expecting to find the cache untouched. I drew my weapon slowly, keeping it low. Donna leaned just enough to put her mouth near my ear. 1 person, she whispered. Maybe 2. The steps are measured. You can count footsteps now. I can count panic, she said. This isn't it. The beam turned again. For 1 pale second I saw a silhouette on the rocks 20 feet away. Slim build. Put up. Standing still with the confidence of someone who knew the terrain. Then darkness took them back. I moved. By the time I cleared the recess and got onto the open stones, the figure was already heading for the cut in the cliff path, fast and sure-footed. I went after them, boots slipping once on kelp-slick rock before I caught myself on an outcrop and kept moving. Stop! Police! The person glanced back just enough for me to catch a flash of something pale at the face. Not enough to identify. Enough to know they were young, or moved young. They took the slope at an angle that told me this wasn't their first trip down. I gained 2 yards, then lost them when a wave crashed against the lower shelf and sprayed the rocks blind. By the time I wiped salt from my eyes and hit the path again, the figure was at the top. Donna, who had gone the other way without announcing it, appeared out of the dark above like she'd been waiting there all night. The hooded figure saw her, cut sharply left, and tried to break toward the grass instead of the trail. Bad choice. Donna didn't tackle them. Donna was too precise for that. She caught the person's wrist, turned the momentum against them, and sent them hard to one knee in the wet grass without ever looking hurried. I reached them 3 seconds later, breathing harder than I wanted to be. The hood had fallen back. Not a man. A woman in her late 20s, maybe early 30s, dark hair plastered to her face by mist, eyes bright, with the specific fury of someone who resents being interrupted in the middle of a lie. She wore a county facilities jacket. My pulse gave one hard knock. Name, I said. She looked at Donna first, not me. Interesting. Maya Bennett. I thought of the initials in Rose's maintenance log. MB. Hands where I can see them. There where you can see them, she snapped. Donna kept her grip exactly where it needed to be. You came back for the bag. Maya's jaw tightened. I don't know what bag you're talking about. I glanced toward the cove below. That's a shame, because I was about to ask why your equipment cache contains a signaling lantern and what looks a hell of a lot like a murder weapon. That landed. Not guilt, not exactly, but a fracture. One clean break in the expression, gone as quickly as it came. I didn't kill anyone, she said. You ran. I saw lights below the cliff after midnight in a murder investigation. You think I was supposed to wave? Most innocent people start with words, I said. Not cardio. Maya's eyes went to the lighthouse behind us, then back to the dark path leading inland. Calculating. Not who to fight. What she could afford to say? Donna eased her hold a fraction, enough to shift the encounter from capture to conversation. She was good at that. Better than me. I tended to make rooms smaller. Donna made people think they still had a choice. You came back because you were afraid of what we'd find, Donna said. That means you already know what's in the recess. It also means you're not the calmest person in this story. Maya gave a short laugh with no humor in it. You have no idea. Then help us. For the first time, real fear moved across her face. Not for herself. That interested Donna too. I could tell. Maya looked out toward the water as if the answer might be waiting offshore. You need to get out of here, she said quietly. That's not happening, I said. You think this is about one dead keeper and a broken light. Her voice sharpened. It isn't. Rose started seeing patterns. He wrote things down. He talked to the wrong people. And now you're standing on a cliff with enough evidence to make very bad men nervous. I stepped closer. Names. She shook her head once. No. Why come back tonight? She hesitated. Donna took over. Because someone told you to remove the cache before dawn. But you delayed. Guilt, maybe. Or fear. Then you saw our lights and realized you were too late. Maya stared at her. People always stared at Donna eventually. Not because she was dramatic. Because she wasn't. I didn't kill Ro, Maya said again, softer this time. Did you warn him? Donna asked. A beat. Then another. Yes, Maya said. I felt the case shift again. You met him, I said. At the cottage? She didn't answer directly. I told him to stop logging the flashes. Stop pushing. Stop asking for access reports. I told him he couldn't win. And he said if the light lied, people died. Her mouth tightened. He was one of those men who still believed duty meant something. That sounded like admiration. Regret, too. Did you call him below the rocks? I asked. No. Who did? She looked at me with open contempt then, though it wasn't really aimed at me. You're asking questions in the wrong order, detective. Try me. The lighthouse beams swept over us again, whitening the grass, the road, the edge of Donna's face. Maya shut her eyes for a second, as if the light itself offended her. When the real ships started using the false signals, she said, it stopped being local. I held very still. Behind us, back down in the cove, something metallic struck stone. All three of us turned. The sound had come from the recess. The bag. I drew my weapon fully now and moved toward the edge of the path. Donna released Maya's wrist, but kept her close, one hand at her arm. Stay here, I said. That's adorable, Donna said, and came with me anyway. We descended just far enough to see the opening below. A flashlight beam flickered once inside the recess, then vanished. Someone else was in there. Not searching. Taking. I started down fast. A shape burst from the cleft and cut across the rocks toward the sea path, larger than the first figure, heavier through the shoulders, face hidden by a dark cap and rain shell. He had the tarred duffel in one hand. Drop it, I shouted. He didn't. Instead, he threw something small and bright off to the side. It shattered against stone. Flame raced blue for half a second, fed by oil. Not enough to trap us. More than enough to blind the next few moves. By the time I got around it, he was already gone into the roar and spray beyond the lower shelf. I followed far enough to know I'd lose him if I kept going. The sea below the last rocks was all violence and black depth. One wrong step, and the case would be walking back to the station without me. I stopped, furious, and listened. Engine noise. Faint. Offshore. A small boat, hidden beyond the east shoal. Of course. By the time I got back up to the path, Donna had Maya Bennett against the rock face. Not roughly, just firmly enough to make escape theoretical. Maya looked less angry now than resigned. You heard the boat? Donna asked me. Yeah. Maya closed her eyes. That means they know, she said. I looked at her in the sweep of the lighthouse beam, at the wet hair plastered to her cheek, the county jacket, the fear she'd been carrying badly and alone. Then start talking, I said. Her eyes met mine. And in that moment, I knew two things with absolute certainty. She had been part of this, and she was terrified of someone we still hadn't seen. We put Maya Bennett in the back of Pierce's SUV because it was warmer than the cliff and less likely to encourage dramatic exits. Rain ticked softly against the roof. The heater coughed lukewarm air that smelled faintly of wet fabric and old coffee. Pierce stood outside the driver's door with both hands on his hips, trying to decide whether he was angry, confused, or grateful to still be included. I recognized the expression. It was the face of a man realizing his jurisdiction had just grown teeth. Donna sat in the seat beside Maya. I stayed outside the open rear door for a moment and watched them. Interrogations don't always begin with questions. Sometimes they begin with silence arranged correctly. Maya's hood was down now. She looked younger in the bad fluorescent spill from the dash, which is never a good sign. Young people in the middle of grown criminal systems either become ruthless fast or frightened forever. Sometimes both. Her dark hair clung damply to her cheeks. Her hands were clasped so tightly I could see the tendons rising in her wrists. Donna sat angled toward her, one leg crossed, posture loose, expression unreadable. She looked elegant even in a storm. It was irritating on principle. I got in and shut the door. For a few seconds nobody spoke. Then I said, "Start with the easy lie." Maya looked at me. "What?" "The first one. The one you planned in case someone caught you near the cliff." Her mouth flattened. "I was checking erosion near the service track." "No," Donna said. Not harsh. Not theatrical. Just no. Maya looked at her, and Donna held the look without blinking. "You came back for the cash because someone told you to remove it before daylight," Donna said. "You delayed because you were hoping the weather would do the job for you. Then you saw lights on the rocks and understood somebody had found what you didn't want found." Maya's jaw tightened. I leaned back slightly. "That part's already dead. Let it go." Outside, a wave hit the cliff hard enough to make the SUV tremble under us. Maya stared at her own hands. "I didn't kill Elias." "Didn't ask that first," I said. "Who told you to go back?" She kept staring down. "I don't know." "That's a lie." "It's not." "Then improve it." Her eyes snapped up. "I got a call from a block number. A man's voice. Told me the weather had shifted. County was all over the tower. And if there was anything below the rocks it had to disappear before dawn." "You recognize the voice," Donna said. A pause. "No." Donna turned slightly in her seat, studying Maya like she was listening to a frequency only she could hear. "You didn't recognize the voice," she said. "But you recognized the structure. The confidence. The assumption that you would obey." Maya's throat moved. "Someone above you," Donna said quietly. "Not socially. Operationally." Maya gave a short, bitter laugh. "You do this for a living?" "Unfortunately." I took Rose's folded note from my coat pocket, still in its evidence sleeve, and held it up between two fingers. "You warned him." Maya stared at it. "At the cottage," I said. "You told him to stop logging the flashes, stop pushing maintenance access, stop asking questions. That was you." She looked away toward the fogged side window. "Yes." "Why?" "Because he wasn't stupid enough to understand how bad it was." That landed oddly enough for me to notice. Donna noticed too. "You mean he was decent enough?" Maya closed her eyes. Nobody spoke for a moment. The heater muttered in the dashboard. Outside, Pierce paced once through the sweep of the lighthouse beam and vanished again. Finally Maya said, The first time I saw it, I told myself it was a workaround. I said nothing. That's the trick sometimes. People hear questions as resistance. They hear silence as permission. I do contract systems maintenance for county navigation assets, she said. Power relays, service rails, backup shutters, weather housings. Black Harbor, East Point, 2 minor markers farther south. Nothing glamorous. Mostly corroded bolts and budget lies. She rubbed rainwater from her chin with the heel of her hand. A few months ago, I started seeing access requests that didn't match my field schedule. Small things at first. Somebody signing into restricted levels late, then scrubbing the digital logs after. Who had that kind of access? I asked. Facilities. Harbor control. Marine operations. Anyone piggybacking somebody higher. So you noticed ghosts in the paperwork, I said. She almost smiled at that, but not quite. Then I noticed hardware. Donna leaned in slightly. At Black Harbor. Maya nodded. The rear bracket in the lantern service housing. It had been modified. Not enough to show on routine inspection if you didn't know where to look. Enough to mount a shutter bar temporarily. Something that could interrupt the beam in a controlled sequence. My mind went back to the scrape marks upstairs. The warm spot Carver had felt. The irregular eclipses in the remote log. You're saying the official light was being manipulated from inside, I said. Yes. By whom? I don't know exactly. That answer sounded truer than the others had. She saw it register and pushed on. But I know why. Offshore transfers. Smuggling, I said. Not cargo ships running aground for insurance money, she said. Not old school wrecking, if that's where your head went. Smaller than that. Faster. High-value stuff. Pills, synthetic compounds, maybe weapons components. Things you move on private hulls at bad hours and bad weather. The false signals created a corridor. Not for the whole harbor. For the people who already knew how to read it. I felt Pierce open the driver's door and slide halfway in, then stop when he realized what he was hearing. To help them clear the shoals, he said. Maya looked at him in the rearview mirror. To help them thread the blind spots. Pierce shut the door softly and stayed where he was, facing forward. I said, and the shore cache? The shore cache was backup. If conditions made the lantern room risky, or if they needed confirmation from below the cliff, they used the shutter lantern and candles to mark timing. Low enough to hide from the road. Visible enough from the water. I looked at Donna. She gave the smallest nod. It fit. Not perfectly. Not all of it. But enough to feel the shape under the surface. Where does Elias Rowe enter the story? I asked. Maya's face changed when I said his name. Not grief exactly. Respect. Shame. He noticed the eclipses first, she said. Then he noticed they never aligned with weather faults. Then he started checking sign-in logs, service requests, maintenance intervals. He was old Coast Guard. He tracked patterns like they offended him personally. That sounds accurate, I said. He confronted Neil Carver once. Carver. Maya nodded. Neil told him he didn't know anything, and probably didn't. Neil's the kind of man who keeps systems running because systems are simpler than people. Her voice dropped. Rowe came to me after that. What did he want? Donna asked. An answer. Maya laughed softly, without humor. And maybe somebody to say he wasn't crazy. Did you? No. Why not? She looked at Donna with sudden anger. Because I like breathing. The SUV went very quiet. I said, who scared you? Her eyes flicked to me, then away. There it was again. That protective hesitation. Not the kind people use when guarding themselves. The kind they use when someone else is tied to the answer. Donna saw it before I did. There's a person attached to this, she said. Not just an organization. Maya's hands tightened again. A brother? Donna asked. Nothing. A husband. Maya's jaw flexed once. No, Donna said softly. Not a husband. Family, though. Maya stared at her in open disbelief. Pierce turned slightly in the front seat. Maya. She ignored him. Donna's voice stayed level. You don't mind being in danger nearly as much as you mind someone else being in danger because of you. That's why you warned Rowe but didn't help him publicly. That's why you came back for the cash instead of disappearing. Someone has leverage over you. Maya swallowed hard enough to hurt. My brother, she said finally. I felt Pierce go rigid in the front seat. Name, I said. Tyler Bennett. Occupation. She looked down. County Marine Deputy. Pierce let out one long breath through his nose. The sound of a man adding up every bad decision in a room and hating the total. Is he in it? I asked. I don't know how far in. That, Again, sounded true. Not good enough, I said. I know, she snapped. You think I don't know? She dragged a hand through her wet hair, suddenly furious with herself. Tyler got pulled into harbor escort work last fall. Night runs. Special traffic support. He said it was unofficial but paid cash through somebody at the marina. I told him he was being stupid. He told me I was being dramatic. Then he started asking me questions about lighthouse maintenance. What kind of questions? Donna asked. Access windows. Blind angles. Manual overrides. How long a service interruption could pass as a glitch. Pierce muttered a curse under his breath. And you answered? I said. Maya flinched as if I'd hit something already bruised. At first I thought he was showing off. Talking big. Then I saw the bracket modification at Black Harbor, and I knew he hadn't asked for no reason. So you confronted him. Yes. And he told me to stay out of it. That usually means he was already in too deep, I said. Yes. Donna folded her hands loosely in her lap. Did Tyler kill Elias Rowe? Maya looked at her for a long time. No, she said at last. Not himself. The wording mattered. I felt Donna notice it too. Who then? I asked. Maya shook her head slowly. I don't know the name. You know the role. Another pause. Then, the man who runs the boats. Pierce turned all the way around now. What man? The one Tyler answers to when he thinks nobody sees it. Maya looked at him. Older. Not uniform. Keeps to the private slips at Cormorant Marina. Expensive rain gear. Never wet enough for a man who works the water full time. Harbor money, then. Or something adjacent to it. Marina owner? I said. I don't know. Broker? I don't know. Give me something useful. She shut her eyes. Gray beard. Always neat. Left hand ring finger broken and set wrong. Smells like clove cigarettes, even outside. That was better. Donna asked. Did Rowe meet him? No. I don't think so. What makes you think that? Because if Elias had known who was behind it, he would have gone straight to the Coast Guard, not kept writing private notes like a man hoping the truth would organize itself. She looked at the evidence sleeve in my hand. He thought he was still dealing with corruption. He didn't understand he was already inside a network. I looked at Pierce. How many private slips at Cormorant? 42 permanent, maybe 15 transient. Who controls marine assignments out there? He rubbed a hand over his mouth. Deputy rotations, harbor office, and contracted security. Which was another way of saying too many people. I asked Maya, did you call Rowe below the rocks? No. Did Tyler? I don't know. Who had access to the spring rig? I built the housing adapter, she said, voice flattening with shame. I told myself it was for testing shutters under storm conditions. Tyler took the design. After that I only saw the finished version once, in the bag. I thought of the metal rod in the cache, the wound in Rowe's chest, the gun staged neatly beside the body. You built the doorway, I said. Someone else walked through it. She nodded once. Nobody seemed to breathe. Then Donna said, what changed tonight? Maya looked at her. You were frightened before, Donna said. Tonight you were desperate. What? Maya's answer came almost at once. Because Tyler called me. That hit harder than I expected. From where? I said. He didn't say. The line was bad. Wind, engine noise maybe. He said, if anyone asks, you were never at Black Harbor after midnight. Then he told me to remove the bag. Her voice dropped. He was scared. Pierce swore again, more softly this time. I felt the shape of the next few hours arrange itself in my head, ugly and fast. Tyler Bennett was either a frightened accomplice, a future corpse, or both. I opened the door and stepped out into the cold. Pierce followed a second later. The lighthouse beam passed over the lot, the tower, the wet road leading inland. Somewhere beyond the bluff, the sea kept moving contraband and lies through darkness older than all of us. Tell me you have units on the marina, I said. Pierce's expression answered before his mouth did. No, he said. Then get them. He was already reaching for his radio. Behind us, through the half-open SUV door, I heard Donna's calm voice carrying low and even. Maya, she said. When Tyler called, was he afraid of arrest? A long silence. Then Maya answered in a voice so quiet I barely caught it. No. Donna waited. Maya said. He was afraid he'd already seen who killed Elias Rowe. And that was when the case stopped being about a dead keeper in a locked room and became what it had been from the start. A race between the truth and whoever had been using the coast as a machine for making people disappear. Cormorant Marina sat 3 miles south of Black Harbor, tucked behind a spit of land and a row of expensive houses that looked out at the Atlantic as if money had granted them diplomatic immunity from weather. We took Pierce's SUV because he knew the roads, and because Maya Bennett was no longer someone I wanted out of sight for even a minute. The wipers beat a hard rhythm across the windshield while red and blue light from the dash reflected across Donna's face in passing strokes, turning her expression into something colder and harder than usual. I drove. Pierce worked the radio beside me, and in the back seat Maya stared at the dark glass as if she expected her brother's face to appear there before we arrived. County Dispatch fed Pierce bad news in pieces, which is how bad news usually travels. One unit had already gone to the wrong fuel dock because somebody at Harbor Control had logged a private transfer under a false berth number. Another deputy reported a patrol skiff missing from its assigned mooring, though no one could yet say whether it had been signed out properly or simply taken by someone who knew how records got cleaned after midnight. Pierce's mouth sat harder with each transmission, and the lines around his eyes deepened until he looked less like a lieutenant and more like a man who had discovered rot behind the walls of his own house. Donna listened without interrupting, but I could tell by the stillness in her that she was sorting people into categories: frightened, compromised, loyal, and already lost. Maya started talking again somewhere along the causeway, not because I asked the right question, but because the silence had turned into pressure. She said Tyler had changed around Thanksgiving, first in small ways and then all at once, and that she had missed the pattern because siblings are very good at mistaking trouble for personality. He had always been restless, always the kind of man who treated rules like suggestions made by lesser minds. But this was different. This had weight, secrecy, and sudden money. He paid off 2 credit cards in December, bought a used center console boat he claimed he got cheap from a retired fisherman, and started carrying himself like someone who had finally found a room where everyone else was dumber than he was. Donna asked her whether Tyler liked feeling powerful or merely safe, and Maya answered after a long pause that with him, those two things had always looked the same. That one line stayed with me all the way to the marina. Men like Tyler do not wake up wanting to become traders in other people's stories. They tell themselves they are making a practical adjustment, taking a shortcut, borrowing confidence from someone more dangerous, and by the time they realize the road has narrowed, there is no shoulder left. Donna once told me that most corruption is not driven by greed at first, but by relief. The relief of belonging, being protected, being chosen, being spared. I had thought she was probably right then, and I was certain of it now. Cormorant Marina appeared through the rain as a blur of mast lights, fuel pumps, and long black fingers of dock reaching into the water. The main office sat dark except for a lamp in the back, but the private slips beyond it carried their own quiet wealth, polished hulls, covered cabins, locked gates, and the smug silence of places built on the assumption that no one asks hard questions after business hours. Pierce had 2 units meeting us there, though I knew from the sound of the radio traffic that one of them had circled to the north entrance because someone had cut the chain at the south service gate. That told me 2 things at once. Someone had left in a hurry, and someone had expected pursuit. Donna read the same fact in my face and said nothing, which was one of the reasons working with her never felt like explaining gravity to a room full of children. We left Maya in the vehicle with a deputy and crossed the lot fast, collars up, flashlights cutting white lines through the mist. The docks creaked under us as we moved past hull after hull, each name painted in tasteful lettering that somehow managed to make the whole place feel more dishonest. Pierce led us toward slip 24 because Maya had finally given him one concrete gift. She had seen Tyler near that berth twice in the past month, once talking to a man in a charcoal raincoat, and once loading something long and wrapped into the stern compartment of a patrol-style boat that should not have been there at all. Halfway down the pier, I caught the smell of fuel and brine, then something sharper under it, clove smoke gone stale in wet air. Donna lifted her head a fraction the same way she had in the tower, and I knew she had caught it too. Slip 24 was empty, but empty in a way that mattered. The ropes had been cast off recently enough that one still swung against the piling, wet and dark, tapping it at irregular intervals like a nervous finger on a tabletop. The shore power cable hung loose with the cap off, and a rectangle of dry decking marked where a storage crate had sat until very recently. Near the cleat, I found a cigarette but trapped against the edge of the dock, damp but intact enough to smell when I brought it close. Clove, exactly as Maya had said, and expensive enough that no one out there was buying it by accident at a gas station. Pierce sent one deputy to secure the office and another to check the fuel ledgers while I followed a faint drag mark toward the service shed near the end of the row. It was not blood, not at first glance, just a disturbed streak through rainwater and fish grit where something heavy had bumped or been pulled. Donna moved ahead of me and stopped at the shed door, not touching it, just looking. "He's in there," she said quietly, and there was nothing dramatic in the way she said it, which made it worse. I reached past her, tried the handle, and found it locked from the outside with a fresh brass padlock that still gleamed under the spray. Pierce cut it with the marina's own bolt cutters, and the sound rang down the dock like a starter's pistol. Inside, the service shed smelled of diesel, rope mold, and panic. Tyler Bennett sat on the floor with his wrists zip-tied behind a steel support post, one cheek swollen, lower lip split, rainwater still beading on his jacket, as if he had only been shoved in there minutes earlier. He looked up when our lights hit him, and what crossed his face was not relief but shame, raw and immediate, the kind that lands before gratitude has a chance to dress itself. I had seen that look on informants, on dirty cops, on sons who had disappointed dead fathers. It never gets easier to look at, because you can see the child inside the adult for one instant before it seals back up. Pierce swore under his breath and dropped to one knee to cut him loose, but Donna touched his shoulder and stopped him. "Wait," she said, and Tyler flinched at the sound of her voice before he even fully focused on her face. That reaction told me almost as much as the bruises did, because people fear authority one way and perception another, and Tyler was afraid of being read. Donna crouched in front of him, green eyes steady, her coat dark with rain, and asked him who had done this. Tyler laughed once, wetly, and said the kind of thing guilty men always say when the truth is already chewing through them from the inside. "You're late." I knelt opposite him and took a closer look. The bruise on his jaw was fresh, but the scrape along his neck had begun to clot in a fine dark line, and there was salt crust on one sleeve where spray had dried before the rain hit it again. He had been near open water, then moved, then locked up, which fit the marina but not a simple dockside beating. "Who put you in here?" I asked, and he looked at me with blood on his teeth and terror trying not to show itself. He glanced once past me toward the open door, toward the slips, toward the water beyond, and that was enough to tell me he still believed the person could come back. Men don't look toward exits when they want to run. They look there when they think something worse might return through them. Tyler asked for Maya before he asked for a lawyer, and that was the first truly human thing he'd done since we found him. Pierce's face hardened at that, but Donna gave him the smallest shake of her head, warning him not to mistake emotional reflex for innocence. I stood, went to the doorway, and told the deputy to bring Maya down under escort, then stepped aside as the wind shoved rain through the opening in short cold bursts. When Maya saw her brother tied to the post, she stopped so abruptly the deputy behind her nearly ran into her, and for a second all her fears stripped away into something simpler and older. "Ty," she said, not loudly, but with the full exhausted grief of someone who had been angry for months and had still never really prepared to lose him. He looked up at her and broke in a way I hadn't expected. The bravado was gone, the half-smart smile gone. The swagger burned clean out of him by whatever had happened on the docks before we arrived. He told her he had tried to back out after Roe died, that he had not known the old man was going to be killed, that he had thought the signals were just for slipping product through restricted water and avoiding Coast Guard eyes and fog. Maya listened without moving, arms wrapped tight across herself, and the rain hissed on the shed roof hard enough to drown out half the words. Then Tyler said the sentence that turned the whole scene on its axis. "It was Garrison, Maya. He did it himself, or had it done right there in the tower, and now he knows I know." Pierce straightened so fast his head nearly hit the hanging rack of life vests. "Garrison who?" he demanded, but Tyler had already gone pale in the face, as if saying the name had cost him something physical. Donna did not raise her voice or move closer. She simply asked Tyler whether Garrison was the man with the broken ring finger and the clove cigarettes, and Tyler stared at her with open disbelief before nodding once. That was enough for me, because people can fake courage and outrage more easily than surprise, and Tyler had not expected us to be that close. I looked out past the open shed door toward the black water between the slips and understood, suddenly and completely, that the marina was not where the night ended. It was where someone had paused long enough to clean a mess, silence a weak link, and head for the next place where evidence could still be erased. "First name," I said, because names matter more when fear finally gives them up. Tyler swallowed blood and rain and shame at the same time, then said, "Russell Garrison." The name landed in the shed with the dull weight of something that had been circling us all night without ever showing its face. Pierce stared at him for a beat too long, and I knew from that silence alone that he recognized it. "Harbor Commissioner's advisor," Pierce said at last, voice flat with disbelief. "Private marine logistics consultant, former pilot, donor to half the county board." He gave a short laugh with no humor in it, and looked toward the wet black slips beyond the shed. Of course it would be someone like him. Donna did not react outwardly, but I saw her eyes narrow by a fraction, which in her was the equivalent of most people slamming a fist on a table. Men like Garrison built themselves in the overlap between authority and deniability, where every introduction sounded legitimate and every favor looked like infrastructure. Tyler started talking before we could press him again, which told me he had reached the point where holding the story inside hurt more than releasing it. He said Garrison used the marina as a relay point, not a headquarters, because headquarters implied permanence and permanence made warrants easier. The Real work moved between private slips, county boats, temporary storage, and offshore handoffs timed to weather windows and light disruptions. Tyler had been useful because he knew the patrol routes and the blind spots, and Maya had been useful because her work let Garrison understand what could be altered inside the harbor system without triggering immediate scrutiny. Maya took that like a blow, but she did not interrupt him. Tyler looked at her only once, and when he did, the boy he must have been at 14 showed through the wreck of the man on the floor. He said he had told himself nobody was getting hurt, that the signals only helped the right boats avoid the wrong inspections, and that once money started coming in he stopped asking questions because questions threatened the story he needed to believe about himself. Then Rose saw the pattern, started logging the interruptions, and refused to let the lie stay technical. "Elias made it moral," Tyler said quietly, staring at the wet concrete between his boots. That's when Garrison stopped treating him like a nuisance and started treating him like a leak. I asked Tyler whether he had been at Black Harbor when Roe died, and for the first time he looked me straight in the face. He said he had been on the water below the cliffs in a skiff with no running lights, waiting for a signal change from shore that never came the way it was supposed to. Instead, he saw Garrison come down from the tower service path alone, calm as a man leaving a meeting, not breathing hard, not stumbling, carrying a wrapped object under one arm, and speaking into a radio with the same tone I had heard from executives ordering lunch. Tyler had known then that something had gone irreversibly wrong, but by the time he reached the marina and dared to ask what happened, Garrison had already decided what part Tyler was going to play next: witness, helper, or disposable problem. "Tonight I was supposed to remove the last of it and keep my mouth shut," Tyler said. When I hesitated, he smiled like he'd expected that too. Donna crouched in front of him again, hands loose at her knees, voice even enough to make the room listen. She asked what Garrison would do now that the cache below the cliff had been discovered. Maya had been caught near it, and Tyler had failed to clean up the marina. Tyler answered without hesitation this time. He said Garrison would not run far immediately, because men like him believed movement created risk and composure erased it. Instead, he would go where the last necessary transfer still had to happen before dawn, finish what he had set in motion, and leave everyone else to look guilty in the wreckage. When Donna asked where that place was, Tyler shut his eyes and said, "East Shoal marker, inside the broken channel." He uses the storm buoy line when visibility drops. He'll think he can still move the boat if the beam sequence changes one more time. That gave us sequence, motive, and destination, which is more than most murderers deserve. Pierce was already on the radio before Tyler finished, calling for Marine units, patrol intercepts, harbor shutdown, Coast Guard liaison, and every favor he had left in a career that was about to get violently shorter or much more interesting. I stepped out into the rain to think, because there are moments in a case when voices become static and all you need is a map in your head and the truth that time has turned against you. Behind me the shed held the broken Bennett siblings, Donna's measured questions, and the smell of diesel and wet rope. In front of me, the marina opened out toward Blackwater, where somewhere beyond the slips a man with clove cigarettes and expensive rain gear was still trying to convert darkness into distance. Donna joined me a minute later, coat collar up, dark hair damp at the temples, green eyes reflecting the dock lights in cold fragments. She said Tyler had lied about one thing, but not the important thing, and that the lie had not been for his protection, but for Maya's. According to him, Garrison had approached Maya's work through him, but Donna was certain it had happened the other way around, with Garrison spotting Maya's technical access, and Tyler becoming the easier point of pressure afterward. He wants to be the one who made the first bad choice, she said, watching the water while she spoke. People do that when guilt becomes the only form of control they think they still possess. I told her that if she ever started saying warm, reassuring things like normal people, I would probably have to stop working with her out of self-respect, and she almost smiled before the expression vanished into the weather. Pierce came out of the shed with a fresh urgency in him that meant the next move had arrived. One patrol boat was unaccounted for, last seen fueled but unofficially logged, and a second private craft had left Cormorant's South Channel 15 minutes before our arrival under blackout conditions. Coast Guard had acknowledged the request for support, but needed confirmation before they rolled heavy assets into what was still technically county water, which was bureaucracy's favorite way of losing a race. Pierce said there was an access cut north of the marina where we could launch faster than the larger units if we wanted a chance of beating Garrison to the shoal. He looked from me to Donna, as if he knew very well what my answer would be, and merely wanted to watch me make the bad decision out loud. We took Pierce's patrol skiff because it was already keyed, already fueled, and already carrying more authority than the night deserved. Tyler stayed in custody with 2 deputies and a paramedic. Maya stayed because Donna said she was safer where the lights were visible, and because I trusted Donna's reads even when they made everyone else unhappy. And Pierce came with me because some lines, once crossed, leave a man no clean way to stand on shore. The engine kicked hard beneath us, and the hull slapped black water as we cleared the breakwall, turning south and east toward the shoal, where the coast pinched into treacherous channels known mostly to old pilots, smugglers, and men who confused experience with immunity. Behind us, the marina shrank into a necklace of wet lights, and ahead the Atlantic opened in long, violent bands of shadow and foam that looked less like geography than intent. The wind got worse as we pushed out, and the spray came over the bow cold enough to sting through my coat and raise salt on my lips. Pierce handled the skiff well, jaw set, one hand steady on the throttle, while the other worked the radio for updates that arrived too late, or not at all. Donna braced beside me with one hand on the rail and the other wrapped around the spotlight handle, not wasting a movement, scanning the chop and marker line, as if the sea were simply another witness refusing to answer clearly. Then, just as the ruined channel markers of East Shoal began to rise out of the dark ahead, the beam from Black Harbor changed behind us. Not fully, not for long, but enough to stutter once across the rain in a pattern no honest lighthouse should ever make. Pierce saw it first and swore. I turned in time to catch the second interruption, brief and deliberate, a blink inside the great rotating eye of the tower. Garrison was still using the light, which meant one of two things. He had an accomplice left inside Black Harbor, or he had built the system to keep lying even while everyone chased him offshore. Donna lifted the spotlight and said, "No," in that quiet way she had when a realization landed complete. "He's not escaping the coast. He's drawing us away from the tower." And in that instant I understood the ugly elegance of it, because if the lighthouse still held the mechanism, the records, or the final proof of how Elias Rowe had died, then we had been racing toward the wrong man, while the most important evidence in the case waited for someone behind us to destroy it. I told Pierce to cut the throttle before he could argue, and the skiff hit the turn hard enough to throw spray across all three of us. The bow slammed once, then again, as we carved back toward Black Harbor with the engine straining and the wind coming at us from the wrong angle now. Behind us, the shoal markers vanished into rain, which was exactly what Garrison had wanted. Distance, confusion, and men chasing motion instead of meaning. Donna kept her eyes on the lighthouse as if she could force it to confess by refusing to look away, and when the beam stuttered a third time, she said, "He built redundancy." in the same tone other people use to announce a death. The run back felt longer even though it wasn't, because urgency stretches water into miles the same way fear stretches seconds into thought. Pierce worked the radio constantly, barking updates, status checks, and profanity at anyone still breathing on county channels. But the replies came in broken and late. One deputy at the tower base was no longer answering. Another unit had reported a county truck leaving the access road 5 minutes earlier, and nobody could confirm whether the driver was authorized because the night had finally become what corrupt systems always become under pressure, a room full of men looking at different clocks. I stood braced against the rail and thought of Roe alone in his quarters, trying to write someone is, before the sentence ended in blood and silence. By the time we hit the breakwater, the storm had moved from nuisance to accomplice. The climb up from the dock road to the lighthouse was slick with mud and blown grit, and the beams swept over us in cold white intervals that made the tower look less like architecture than an instrument. The county cruiser at the base sat with its driver's door open and the light bar still flashing, but no one was standing outside it. Then I saw Deputy Sloan half on his side near the entrance wall, one arm tucked under him awkwardly, rain collecting on his jacket. He was alive, which counted as a gift at that hour. A lump was rising along his hairline, and there was blood at one ear, but his pulse was steady when I checked it, and his pupils answered light with enough discipline to keep me moving. He grabbed weakly at my sleeve before I could stand and said, "Inside," with the frustration of a man angry at his own body for failing him. Donna asked him how many, and he swallowed hard before answering. "One. Maybe one." I heard the door, then nothing. Pierce stayed with him long enough to radio for medics and draw his sidearm, then came after us into the tower with the expression of a man who had stopped expecting clean endings. The base level smelled wrong immediately. Salt and oil belonged there, clove smoke did not. Neither did the sharper floral note we had been chasing in fragments since the first minutes of the case. Only here it was stronger, warmed by machinery and mixed into the breath of the place, as if the tower itself had been rubbed with it. Donna touched the wall just inside the threshold, then held her fingertips up to the light without actually brushing them together. "Fresh," she said, meaning oil, residue, passage, and intention all at once. We started up the stairwell together, slow enough to listen, fast enough to know we were already late. The keeper's quarters had been opened again, and the scene inside looked like violence of a different order. Roe's body was gone to the me by then, but the room had been disturbed around the absences, desk drawer yanked out, boards near the bed pried up, the window latch half removed from its screws. A corner of the logbook had been burned black in a metal tray on the floor, not enough to destroy it entirely, only enough to erase the last entry if someone had succeeded and had more time. I picked it up carefully and saw that the page with "someone is" had been charred along the edge but survived in the middle, protected by the fold of paper and maybe by luck, which had finally decided to stop working exclusively for the other side. Donna was already at the stove, studying the back plate where I had first noticed how oddly cold everything else felt around the murder. "Adrian," she said, and I crossed to her. The iron panel had been loosened, not fully removed, and behind it a narrow service cavity ran upward inside the wall toward the lantern mechanism above. Fresh scrape marks lined the seam, and one bolt lay on the floor beside a rag that smelled of clove and machine oil. "He came back for the path," she said, looking toward the ceiling rather than at me. "Not just the evidence. The route." That was when I heard the metallic knock from above, small but distinct, like a tool set down by someone who believed they still had another minute. Pierce heard it too, because he was already moving toward the upper stairs before I fully straightened. We climbed the final spiral at speed, boots ringing on iron, the tower narrowing around us until the lantern room opened overhead in bursts of wet light and turning glass. The beam cut through the rain as steadily as a pulse now, which told me whoever had interrupted it was either done or confident enough to stop. Neither possibility improved my mood. Russell Garrison stood with his back half turned to us beside the rear service housing, one hand on the bracket assembly and the other holding a compact driver tool that looked absurdly neat in a room where a man had been killed for noticing patterns. He wore a charcoal raincoat exactly as Maya had described, dry enough in the shoulders to tell its own story, and when he looked over at us there was not a trace of panic in his face. Gray beard, clean lines, left ring finger bent wrong at the middle joint, and eyes so calm I understood in one instant how men like Tyler had mistaken composure for competence and competence for safety. "Detective," he said to me, as if we had met at a fundraiser instead of a murder scene, "you've made this unnecessarily theatrical." I have learned over the years that the most dangerous people are rarely the loudest in the room. Garrison did not reach for a gun, did not posture, did not even step back from the bracket he had been dismantling. Instead, he glanced once at Donna and once at Pierce, taking our measure with an administrator's efficiency, as if deciding which malfunction to address first. Donna spoke before I did, and her voice was soft enough to make him listen harder. "You came back because the mechanism matters more than the product," she said. "Smuggling survives an arrest. A system only survives if no one understands how it worked." Something flickered behind his eyes then, not fear, not yet, but irritation at accuracy. "You overestimate the romance of your profession," he said. "Infrastructure is often just infrastructure." I raised my weapon and told him to move away from the housing, but he only smiled a little, the way men smile when they believe distance still belongs to them. "If you fire in here," he said, "you risk the lens, the fuel line, and all the evidence you've come to admire." I wonder whether Detective Flynn has already calculated that. He had, I realized, not just power and reach, but the habit of testing people with the expectation they would reveal themselves on command. Donna did not blink. "You killed Elias Rowe because he turned a technical irregularity into an ethical problem," she said. "You couldn't buy him, couldn't frighten him, and couldn't leave him alive once he understood the light itself was being used as a language." Garrison's attention shifted to her fully now, and for the first time I saw him stop managing his face for a fraction of a second. "He was a functionary," he said, and there was mild annoyance in it, as if the dead should have remained administrative. "He was a keeper," Donna replied, "which is why his refusal offended you more than his knowledge." He moved then, but not toward us. His hand dropped to the rear bracket and twisted hard, and the lantern room answered with a shriek of metal under strain. A hidden shutter arm snapped free beneath the housing, caught the rotating assembly for a fraction of a turn, and sent the beam lurching sideways in a violent white sweep that filled the chamber with broken light. Pierce cursed and ducked. I grabbed the rail on instinct, and Garrison used the single second of confusion exactly the way men like him always do. Not dramatically, but efficiently. He hurled the driver tool into the fuel tray at our feet, kicked the loosened oil rag after it, and the room bloomed orange at the edge with sudden hungry fire. What happened next took maybe 5 seconds, though my memory keeps trying to spread it over a minute. I kicked the tray clear before the flame could climb. Pierce threw his coat over the worst of it, and Donna went not toward the fire, but toward the service hatch on the outer gallery, because she had already seen the actual escape. By the time I got the flame under control enough to breathe without tasting kerosene, Garrison was through the side maintenance door and out into the storm on the gallery beyond the lantern glass. I reached it 2 beats behind Donna and saw him descending the exterior service ladder bolted to the tower's seaward side, moving with infuriating care, not rushing, because even then he believed control was more powerful than speed. I would have gone after him if Donna had not caught my sleeve and pointed back to the bracket housing. Wedged inside the open service cavity, half hidden behind the shutter mechanism Garrison had failed to remove, sat a sealed maintenance recorder the size of a hardback book, its indicator light blinking stubbornly green through soot and smoke. He had come back for that. Not just the bracket, not just the logs, but the one object likely to show every manual override, every service interruption, every timing sequence that turned Black Harbor's light from warning into code. Outside, Garrison disappeared into rain and darkness below the gallery, but inside the lantern room the machine he trusted most had finally refused to lie for him any longer. For one stupid half-second I watched the rain beyond the gallery and considered going after Garrison anyway. Then training, exhaustion, and Donna Flynn all arrived at the same conclusion before my pride did. A fleeing man is still only one moving piece. A recorder inside the mechanism that proved how he had bent the lighthouse into a signaling system was the spine of the whole case. Donna had already crossed to the housing and was bracing the sealed unit with both hands, careful not to jar the loosened bracket around it, while Pierce stamped out the last stubborn tongues of flame with his smoking coat and a level of profanity that would have impressed the harbor itself. I holstered my weapon and joined Donna at the service cavity. The recorder was mounted behind the false shutter arm on a custom bracket, not county issue, wired into the manual override relay and partially shielded from ordinary inspection by the lantern housing itself. Whoever had designed it understood maintenance schedules, inspection shortcuts, and the lazy faith institutions place in machines that continue to function most of the time. He needed the light to tell two stories at once, Donna said, eyes moving over the wiring without touching any of it. One public, one private, and the private one only visible to people already trained to expect lies. Pierce called for evidence technicians, state backup, and every Marine unit still capable of pointing a bow into weather, but even he knew the recorder could not wait for daylight and paperwork. I used the hem of an evidence cloth from the upstairs kit to lift the unit clear, while Donna steadied the cable ends and photographed the bracket with Pierce's phone before anything shifted. The device was heavier than it looked, industrial, weather-sealed, and warm from recent current, which meant Garrison had either been downloading from it or trying to disconnect it when we interrupted him. There is a particular kind of satisfaction in holding the thing a murderer came back for, especially when he nearly set the room on fire to keep it from being seen, and I will not pretend I felt anything noble in that moment. We carried it back down to the keeper's quarters because the lantern room still smelled too much like scorched fuel and panic for clear thinking. Pierce found an intact power adapter in the lower maintenance cabinet, and for once county procurement had accidentally bought something useful instead of merely expensive. When the recorder came alive, the screen asked for credentials in a stripped-down service interface that would have slowed most men for maybe 30 seconds. Donna looked at it once, then at the custom mount, then at the handwritten initials from Rose's note lying bag beside the damaged logbook, and said, "Try a maintenance access pattern, not a password. Men like Garrison trust procedure because procedure hides intent." She was right, which stopped surprising me a long time ago and never made it less irritating. Using the after-hours sign-in sequence from the false maintenance entries and a default relay key Maya had mentioned in passing, I got past the lockout screen on the second attempt. The first folder held override logs for the lantern assembly going back 4 months, each interruption timestamped to the second and matched to weather windows, tide changes, and channel traffic. The second folder was worse. Coded transfer schedules, slip numbers, marine call signs, and a list of private hulls flagged by color, draft, and preferred weather cover. The third folder was the kind of thing that ends careers even before it ends freedom, because it included names, payments, county badge numbers, and service authorizations pushed through by people who would absolutely describe themselves as guardians of public safety while the handcuffs clicked shut around them. Pierce went pale reading the list. Not performatively pale, not shocked for the sake of drama, but hollowed out in real time by the number of people whose signatures he recognized. 2 Marine deputies, 1 harbor office dispatcher, 1 facilities supervisor, 3 shell companies tied to storage rentals, and enough quiet payments to keep half the county explaining itself under oath for the next year. Then, near the bottom of a file marked contingency, we found what Garrison had truly returned to erase. A short maintenance video captured from the service housing camera during the hour Elias Rowe died. The angle was bad, the sound worse, but the picture showed enough. Rowe opening the panel behind the stove after hearing movement in the wall, Garrison entering the quarters through the concealed service path from above, a struggle compressed into seconds, and the spring-driven rod being fired at close range before the revolver was placed at the body to build the lie. Nobody spoke while it played. Rain struck the narrow window in thin, hard bursts, and somewhere below us medics were finally getting Sloan onto a stretcher, but inside that room everything had narrowed to a dead man's last correct suspicion. Rowe had not merely noticed false lights below the cliffs or irregular eclipses in the beam. He had found the hidden path and the mechanism behind it, which meant Garrison had been forced to act before the wider network could be cleaned and reset. Donna watched the clip only once, then looked away at the exact second the rod fired, not because she could not bear it, but because once she understood a thing she saw no virtue in consuming it twice. "He's not running blind," she said after a moment, voice low and steady. "He left the tower because the recorder was no longer recoverable, but he still has one remaining objective." Pierce looked up from the payment logs with the dazed anger of a man trying to decide which betrayal to hate first, and I asked her what objective she meant, even though part of me already knew. Control of the witnesses, she said. Tyler can name him. Maya can connect the hardware. This recorder proves the method, and the payment list tears open the network. A man like Garrison does not flee until he has reduced the number of speaking mouths. The words landed so cleanly that none of us tried to argue with them. Pierce was already barking into the radio for the deputies at the marina to move Tyler and Maya immediately, but the answer came back broken by static, then by something worse than static, confusion. One deputy had gone to meet the incoming ambulance at the gate. The second had last checked in 2 minutes earlier, and now both channels were stepping on each other with half-cent transmissions and raised voices. I felt my entire body go cold in a way the storm had not managed once all night. Garrison had not needed to beat us everywhere. He only needed to think faster than the system, and unfortunately the system had spent years teaching him how. We ran for the base of the tower with the recorder, the bagged logbook, and enough evidence to sink a county if we survived the next 20 minutes. The access road below was a smear of wet gravel and pulsing emergency light, the ambulance just arriving as Pierce shoved us toward the SUV with a speed that bordered on fury. I took the wheel because I knew he would try to drive through 3 parked vehicles and a retaining wall if I let him, while Donna slid into the front beside me with the recorder braced on her knees like something alive and dangerous. As I threw the SUV onto the road toward Cormorant Marina, tires kicking mud, Donna looked out into the rain and said the one sentence I least wanted to hear and most needed to believe. If Maya is still alive, she will do exactly one thing now. She will stop trying to protect Tyler and start trying to save him. The drive back to Cormorant felt shorter than the first run, which is what happens when dread starts measuring distance instead of miles. Rain sheeted across the windshield so hard the marina lights appeared and vanished like signals from a language I had begun to hate personally. Pierce kept one hand on the radio and the other braced against the dash, listening to broken transmissions that told us everything and nothing at the same time. Donna sat beside me with the recorder anchored against her knees, eyes fixed on the road ahead. So still she looked carved out of the storm itself. We hit the marina lot too fast and stopped half sideways across 2 marked spaces, tires skidding on wet pavement before the engine had fully died. The deputy assigned to Maya was down near the office wall with a stun welt burned high on his neck, conscious but shaking and too furious to answer in sequence. The second deputy was nowhere in sight, and the rear door of Pierce's SUV stood open with one interior light still glowing over an empty back seat. Maya had not been taken cleanly. I could tell that much at once, because one of her earrings lay in the runoff by the curb, and the smear on the door frame was not blood but black marina grease, the kind you collect when you fight being dragged past machinery. Donna crouched by the earring, not touching it, then stood and looked toward the slips instead of the shed. She did exactly what I said. She told me, voice low and level under the weather. She got out to reach Tyler before Garrison could. Pierce swore and started toward the service dock, but Donna caught his sleeve for half a second and added, "No, not the shed. That would be the old plan." She turned her face toward the far end of the marina, where the private fuel pier jutted into darker water beyond the main slips. He'll move them where engines drown voices and fire can erase sequence. That was enough for me. We ran the length of the wet dock with the spotlight beam jumping ahead of us in white bursts, our boots hammering on planks slick with rain and fish grit. Halfway down I saw the missing deputy by the bait freezer, alive but zip-tied to a cleat and gagged with a torn shop rag, which told me Garrison was still choosing efficiency over rage. Men in panic leave messes because they stop believing control is possible. Men like Garrison become neater under pressure, because control is the only religion they have ever truly practiced. I cut the deputy loose without stopping, and he pointed with both hands toward the fuel pier before his voice had fully returned. The fuel dock sat beyond a line of moored sport boats, half hidden by tarped hulls and rain curtains, but the sound reached us before the scene did. A skiff engine idled low and steady, not revving yet, just waiting, and over it I heard a woman's voice cut sharp through the weather. Maya. Not pleading, which was somehow worse, because pleading leaves room for mercy, and this had moved past mercy a while ago. When we cleared the last gangway, the whole arrangement opened at once. Tyler on his knees near the pump housing with his hands bound in front of him, Maya standing 3 feet away with a flare gun aimed badly but bravely, and Russell Garrison at the edge of the dock, holding a compact pistol, so casually, it looked like an accessory rather than a decision. He had Tyler positioned between himself and the open water, which was smart, and between Maya and Tyler, which was smarter. Maya's face was white with rain and fear, but her arm stayed up, stubborn despite the tremor in it, and Tyler kept telling her to lower the flare gun in the desperate, furious voice of a man who had finally discovered the price of every shortcut he had ever taken. Garrison, by contrast, looked merely inconvenienced. His coat was wet now, his hair flattened by weather, but he still held himself like a man at the end of a negotiation rather than the center of a murder inquiry. "Drop it," I said, and my own gun came up before the words had fully left me. Garrison turned just enough to see that Donna and Pierce had split wide on either side behind me, which spoiled the geometry he had probably been counting on. He smiled then, a small tired smile made uglier by sincerity, and glanced at the fuel lines, the skiff, the storm-dark water beyond the pier. "You continue to mistake exposure for victory, detective," he said. "These people were always going to destroy themselves. I only gave their weaknesses a structure." Maya's arm shook harder, and Donna answered before I could. "No," she said quietly. "You built a stage and called it inevitability because that sounds cleaner than greed." Something in him changed when she said that. It was not temper in the ordinary sense, not shouting or theatrics, but a cold tightening around the eyes, the expression of a man who could tolerate accusation more easily than understanding. He shifted the pistol a fraction toward Maya, and Tyler moved instinctively in front of her despite the bind on his wrists, which told me guilt had finally completed its long, stupid conversion into love. Pierce took one step left, drawing Garrison's attention, and in that instant Donna did the thing she always did best. She struck not at the hand, but at the mind holding it. "You came back for the recorder because the mechanism mattered more than the money," she said. "Not because of the operation. Because you needed to believe you were the only mind in the room. Elias Rowe offended you. Tyler frightened you. Maya disappointed you. And now all that is left is proving you still control the ending." Garrison's eyes flicked to her, just once, but once was enough. Maya fired the flare gun. The shot went wide, hissing red past Garrison's shoulder into the wet black alongside the dock. Yet the violence of the light shattered his calm for exactly the second we needed. I took the shot low, aiming for his weapon arm, while Pierce drove forward from the left, and Tyler threw himself sideways at Garrison's knees with the reckless desperation of a man trying to earn back a soul on credit. The pistol cracked, the round went into the pump housing instead of a body, and the dock exploded into noise, flame warning alarms, shouted orders, and the hard, ugly sound of two men hitting wet boards with no grace in them. I reached Garrison first. He hit the planks hard, lost the pistol, tried once to rise, and stopped when my knee drove into his shoulder blades and pinned him against the dock with his bad hand twisted behind him. He did not beg, which I will give him, but he also did not deny a thing. Men like him reserve innocence for courtrooms, where innocence can be tailored. Pierce snapped cuffs on him with such force the metal bit skin, and then everyone stood breathing hard in the flare-lit rain, while the marina alarm kept shrieking over us like an animal that had smelled blood too late. Donna crossed to Maya, lowered the empty flare gun from her locked hand, and checked Tyler's shoulder where the grazing round had torn fabric and skin without taking the arm. For a long moment nobody said anything worth remembering. The storm moved around us. The skiff knocked softly at the pilings, and Russell Garrison lay face down on the dock in handcuffs while the false architecture of his control finally collapsed into weather, witnesses, and pain. Then Tyler looked at Maya with rain and shame running down his face together and said, "I'm sorry," in the voice of a man who understood at last that the sentence was too small for the damage but had no larger one to offer. Donna looked at me across the pier, green eyes cold and tired and absolutely certain, and I knew before Dawn had even begun to think about breaking that the case was over in the practical sense and only beginning in the human one. Dawn came in slowly and without dignity, the way it always does after a night that has taken too much and plans to apologize for none of it. The rain broke first into mist, and then into a fine gray drift that hung over the marina like exhausted breath. Garrison sat cuffed on a metal chair inside the harbor office with a thermal blanket across his shoulders and the same composed expression he had worn on the Lighthouse gallery, as if arrest were merely an administrative delay. I have never trusted men who can look civilized while other people are still bleeding within earshot. Tyler got 6 stitches in his shoulder, and a deputy posted outside the exam room, which seemed fair on both counts. Maya refused treatment until she had given her first statement, and Donna let her do it because some people fall apart if you ask them to wait until they feel safe. Pierce moved through the office like a man trying to hold a building upright with his own hands, one radio in his palm, 2 detectives from internal affairs on the way, and a list of names expanding faster than his patience. The recorder from Black Harbor sat on the conference table between us in an evidence cradle, its cables bagged, its housing tagged, and its contents copied to 3 encrypted drives before anyone had time to decide what should disappear. I spent an hour building the sequence out loud because sequence is the one mercy a murder investigation can offer the dead. Elias Rowe noticed irregular eclipses in the lighthouse beam and began documenting them because duty, unlike corruption, requires repetition. When his reports were ignored or misfiled, he started checking maintenance access and discovered signs of unauthorized work inside the tower, including the hidden service path and the modified bracket system behind the lantern housing. Garrison, realizing Rowe had moved from suspicion to proof, entered through the concealed route, killed him with the spring-fired rod to avoid the obvious signatures of a gunshot, staged the revolver beside the body, and then locked the room in a way designed to make ordinary investigators stop thinking once the word suicide entered the room. Donna took over from there, not to repeat the facts but to explain the human shape behind them. She said Garrison had not built the operation simply to move contraband, but to control a theater in which everyone else mistook usefulness for safety. Tyler had been recruited because he wanted status without patience, Maya because she had access without enough institutional power to protect herself, and the county personnel on the payment logs because small corruptions become habits long before they become headlines. Rowe alone had refused the language of compromise, which was why Garrison had taken his defiance personally. He did not kill a witness, Donna said, standing at the edge of the conference table with her damp coat draped over one chair. He killed the one man in the system who still believed the system was obligated to mean what it said. Nobody answered her for a moment because there was nothing to add. Maya sat with both hands around a paper cup she had not touched, listening as if each sentence removed another layer of denial she had once used to survive. Tyler sat 2 chairs farther down with his bandaged shoulder rigid and his eyes fixed on the tabletop, and I could tell he was hearing Rowe's death for the first time not as an outcome, but as a choice. Pierce looked older than he had the night before, which was saying something, and when he finally spoke, he did it through the clenched restraint of a man who knew anger would be a luxury for later. We've got search warrants in motion for Cormorant, the harbor office, county facilities records, Garrison's home, and 3 storage sites connected to the shell companies, he said. If there's any luck left in this county, we're about to find out whether it works for us for once. Garrison asked for a lawyer only after he heard that, which told me he had been measuring the room and waiting to see whether he could still talk his way into the driver's seat. Until then he had remained almost politely silent, saying yes when offered water, no one asked whether he needed a medic, and nothing at all when Tyler was led past him under guard. I went into the holding room alone because I wanted to hear him without Pierce's anger or Donna's precision changing the air. He sat with his cuffed hands folded and looked at me the way men look at hotel staff when they think the wrong luggage has been delivered. You have enough for a headline, he said, but not enough to understand what you've interrupted. I pulled out a chair, sat opposite him, and told him the Lighthouse recorder had video. That was the first time I saw him miscalculate. He covered it quickly, but not quickly enough. His eyes narrowed, not in panic but in revision, which is what men like Garrison do when reality declines to honor the version they prepared. Then you know what happened, he said. I know what you did, I answered. Understanding is the part you keep mistaking for ownership. He almost smiled at that, though the smile never reached the rest of him. And then he said the sentence I had been expecting from him since the first moment I saw how clean his coat had stayed in bad weather. If you think this ended with me, detective, you have spent too long in cities and not enough time where supply meets opportunity. That was not a confession, but it was close enough to the truth to be useful. Networks like his never belong entirely to one man, though they often depend on one man to believe that they do. Even so, I had what I needed: method, motive, coordination, payment, and a dead keeper whose final suspicion had been vindicated by the very machine turned against him. When I stood to leave, Garrison leaned back in the chair and asked whether Roe had suffered. It was the first cruel thing he had said plainly, and for that reason it was also the most honest. I told him Elias Roe had enough time to know he was right, and that was the only answer he was ever getting from me. When I came back into the main office, Donna was by the window with Maya, speaking quietly enough that I caught only fragments. Maya's face had changed since the night before, not because she felt better, but because fear had finally yielded some territory to anger. Tyler had signed the beginning of a cooperation statement and was now adding times, routes, and names with the flat, exhausted obedience of a man who had discovered that redemption, if it exists at all, starts with inventory. Pierce had 3 county cars outside, 2 state investigators inside, and enough coffee on the counter to power a coup. The storm had moved offshore by then, leaving the harbor washed clean in appearance only, which felt appropriate. Around 9, the call came from the tower. Technicians had opened the hidden service route fully and found the rest of the mechanism embedded in the wall cavity between the keeper's quarters and the lantern level, including the guide sleeve that aligned the spring-fired rod and the latch system that allowed the room to be secured after the attacker withdrew. They also found traces of the same perfumed oil used on the shore lantern and bracket assembly, which meant Garrison had marked all parts of the operation with the same private signature, the vanity of a man who believed systems became art when he designed them. On the desk in Roe's quarters, beneath the half-burned logbook, one of the technicians had found a folded page shoved under the blotter where the first search missed it. It was another note in Roe's hand, written earlier in the week, and it contained 4 words that hit me harder than anything Garrison had said all morning. If found, trust Flynn. I read the line twice before I showed Donna, which is not professional but is human, and I make no apologies for it. She took the paper, looked at the words, and for the first time since I'd known her, truly lost her expression. It returned a second later, of course, because Donna Flynn does not break where other people can see it if she can help it, but something quiet had moved behind her eyes and stayed there. He remembered the interview, she said, and I knew exactly which one she meant. The old case down in Brooklyn 3 years earlier, the one with the harbor insurance fraud ring, the one Roe had briefly testified in as a technical witness when a shipping company tried to bury a falsified beacon report. He had recognized her name when Pierce called us in, then, and asked for us specifically because somewhere under all the years, and whether he had remembered that she was the kind of investigator who listened when systems tried to dismiss men like him as difficult. That gave the case a shape I had not expected and did not especially enjoy. It meant Roe had not died hoping someone might eventually understand him. He had died with a name in mind, a person he believed would hear the difference between malfunction and malice. That kind of trust is a burden if you have any conscience at all, and Donna had more of one than she liked people to notice. She folded the note once, very carefully, and handed it back to me for evidence bagging. Then she looked through the wet window toward the coast where Black Harbor stood pale against the retreating storm and said, "We finish it properly." I told her we would, and for once the words did not feel like comfort or strategy. They felt like a promise made in the only currency the dead can still collect. By noon the storm had withdrawn far enough offshore to leave Black Harbor standing in a washed-out light that made everything look temporarily honest. That is one of the crueler tricks weather plays after violence. It clears the air just enough to suggest the world has corrected itself, when all it has really done is improve visibility. Donna and I went back to the tower with the state technicians, Pierce, and a forensics team that now moved with the reverence people reserve for places where denial has been officially revoked. The lighthouse no longer felt haunted to me, which was worse in some ways, because what had happened there was not supernatural or unknowable, but engineered by men who had understood exactly how much trust the structure inspired. The hidden route was uglier in daylight than it had been in theory. Behind the loosened stove plate in the keeper's quarters, the wall cavity rose in a narrow maintenance shaft to a concealed service access behind the lantern housing, just wide enough for a lean man with practice and no conscience. The spring mechanism had been anchored in a bracket that allowed the sharpened rod to be aligned and fired from close range with brutal precision, then withdrawn through the shaft, while the false evidence of suicide was arranged in the room below. Watching the technicians photograph, bag, and label each component, I kept thinking of Elias Rowe hearing the movement in the wall, opening the panel, and discovering that the lighthouse itself had been turned into the weapon that killed him. Donna stood near the desk while they worked, one gloved hand resting lightly on the back of the chair Rowe had used for his log entries, and I could tell she was reconstructing not only the mechanics, but the final emotional sequence. Rowe had not died confused. She said quietly to me when the others were busy with measurements, and that mattered more to her than I had expected. He knew the thing he was looking at belonged to design, not accident, and that knowledge would have changed his fear into recognition in the last seconds before Garrison struck. There is a strange comfort in knowing a victim was not lost inside nonsense when they died, and a strange cruelty too, because recognition often arrives hand in hand with betrayal. Pierce called us down to the base level after the state investigators finished their first pass. Tyler had completed a fuller statement from the clinic and named 3 more county employees who had helped smooth routes, erase marina records, and bury prior complaints about Black Harbor's beam interruptions. Maya had agreed to walk the technicians through the modified bracket design and identify which portions of the hardware had been adapted from legitimate maintenance systems versus built specifically for the smuggling operation. Neither of them was being treated gently, nor should they have been, but for the first time since I had met them both, the lies were no longer leading the conversation. Once truth enters a room in enough quantity, even the guilty begin to speak differently. In the afternoon, we drove to Rose Cottage because there are tasks at the end of a case that no report, however accurate, can perform for you. His daughter, Lena, had arrived from Boston that morning and was standing on the porch when we pulled up, arms folded against the cold, a resemblance to her father visible in the set of her jaw before she said a word. She was younger than I expected, old enough to have built a life elsewhere, and still young enough to look offended by the fact that grief had tracked her down anyway. Donna spoke first, not with apologies, because apologies are thin at a door like that, but with clarity, and told her that her father had not taken his own life, had not abandoned his duty, and had seen the truth clearly enough that people killed him to keep it buried. Lena closed her eyes when she heard that, and for a second I thought she might fall, but she only reached for the porch rail and held on until the sentence settled inside her properly. She told us her father had always trusted systems right up until the exact moment they gave him reason not to, and that once they lost his trust they never got it back cheaply. Then she asked whether he had been afraid, and I looked at Donna before answering because she had the cleaner understanding of it. Donna said he had been alert, angry, and resolute, which was not the whole truth and not a lie either, and Lena nodded in a way that told me it was close enough to the father she knew to count as mercy. When we left the cottage, the sea was visible through the bare branches beyond the road, gray and indifferent, and very nearly beautiful. I stood beside the car while Donna buttoned her coat against the wind, and for a minute neither of us said anything because the case had moved beyond deduction and arrest into that quieter territory where all that remains is what the truth costs after it is spoken. Finally, I told her Rowe had been right to trust her, and she looked out toward the lighthouse rather than at me when she answered. "No," she said, voice low and steady as ever. "He was right to force us to earn it." 2 days later, the county held its first press conference, and it had all the grace of a house being forced to admit termites had been eating the beams for years. Cameras crowded the harbor office steps. Microphones bloomed like weeds, and men in expensive coats tried to look like they had been shocked by facts their signatures had helped survive. Pierce stood at the podium with a bandage still visible at his wrist and read the arrests in a voice so level it made the list sound even worse. Russell Garrison was charged with murder, conspiracy, evidence tampering, smuggling-related offenses, and enough associated crimes to make the rest of his life a matter for other men to schedule. Tyler Bennett was remanded, cooperative, and under guard, which was the cleanest way to describe a man who had chosen the truth only after it became more painful to keep lying. Maya entered a formal statement that burned through what remained of her professional life, but gave the prosecutors the structure they needed to prove intent, access, and design. Neither of them walked away innocent, and neither should have, But there are gradations of guilt that matter when a court begins sorting cowardice from cruelty. Garrison, by contrast, had graduated long ago from compromise into authorship, and even in custody, he carried himself like someone waiting for the institution to remember who had funded it. The recorder from Black Harbor gave the state everything it needed, and then some. The manual override logs matched the transfer schedules, the payment files matched county access records, and the maintenance video made arguments smaller than evidence. Once the hidden shaft and spring mechanism were fully documented, the locked room miracle dissolved into something uglier and simpler. A man who had weaponized trust in order to move profit through darkness and kill anyone who turned machinery back into meaning. There are cases where the final explanation lessens the horror because the impossible turns human. This was not one of them. Donna and I stayed through the formal handoff because finishing a case properly means staying long enough to see it leave your hands for the right reasons. By then the weather had settled into a cold, clean wind off the water, and Black Harbor's beam turned steadily over the coast without a single false interruption. State technicians had removed the illicit mechanism, sealed the shaft, and restored the service housing to something close to honest function, though I doubted the tower would ever feel honest again to anyone who knew what had happened inside it. Buildings remember less than people do, but they keep it longer. That evening, just before we drove back to the city, Pierce arranged for us to meet Lena, row 1 last time at the Lighthouse. The county had decided to place a temporary plaque in the service room until a proper memorial could be approved, which is the sort of bureaucratic sentence that usually makes me tired on sight. But the plaque itself was simple enough to avoid insult. It read, Elias Rowe, Keeper. He saw the truth and held the light. That was better than most institutions manage for their dead. Lena stood beside it for a long moment with one hand in her coat pocket and the other resting lightly against the cold wall. She did not cry there, not in front of us, and I respected her for that the way I respect anyone who refuses to perform grief for an audience. Instead, she asked to see the lantern room, and we took her up the spiral stair while the sea moved below us in long steel bands under the late light. When the beam turned across the water, she watched it once, then said her father used to tell her that a lighthouse was a promise, not just a machine, and that if a promise starts lying, people die in places they never expected. Donna answered her before I could. She said the promise had been broken by people, not by the light itself, and that this mattered because corruption always tries to pass itself off as weather. Lena looked at her then with the same focused intelligence her father must have recognized years earlier, and I understood why Rowe had written that quiet note under his blotter instead of waiting for permission from men less worthy of it. Some people earn trust by being brilliant. Donna earned it by refusing to look away when brilliance would have been easier than conscience. We left the coast at dusk, my car heading west with the ocean shrinking in the rearview mirror and the city waiting somewhere beyond the long dark road. Donna sat beside me with her boots up against the edge of the seat, jacket folded beneath her head, not asleep, but allowing the silence to exist without needing to improve it. Cases end in paperwork, arraignments, and chain of custody forms, but the real ending is usually smaller. It comes in the first quiet moment after the dead have been believed and the living have run out of useful lies. That night, for the first time since Pierce's call reached my desk, the world felt like it had stopped leaning. About an hour from the city, Donna opened her eyes and asked me what I would write in my report summary. I told her the truth, which was that a locked room had never been the mystery, only the disguise. The real mystery had been how many people could look at a warning light and decide it was more profitable as a code. She considered that, then turned her face toward the window where distant highway lamps blurred in the glass, and said, "And yet one man still wrote it down." I said yes, he did, and for a while after that neither of us felt the need to add anything. When I got home, I hung my coat by the door and stood in the dark living room longer than necessary, listening to the city shift itself around midnight. New York makes a different kind of sound from the coast, less ancient and more impatient. But both places know how to hide things if the right people ask them to. I thought about Rowe in his quarters, hearing movement in the wall, and choosing to look anyway. I thought about Tyler and Maya discovering too late that fear does not become safety just because it is paid well. And I thought about Donna Flynn, standing in a lighthouse chamber with a dead man's final trust folded in her hand, like something breakable. There are cases you solve and cases that alter the angle at which you see other people afterward. Black Harbor was the second kind. It reminded me that institutions fail in the same way men do. Gradually, conveniently, and then all at once when someone decent finally refuses to help them pretend. Elias Rowe had done that, and it had cost him his life. The least the rest of us could do was make sure the light told the truth again. And that, in the end, was the whole business of it. Not the mechanism in the wall, not the false signals offshore, not even Russell Garrison in his careful raincoat and borrowed authority. Those were only methods. The real story was simpler and harder. A keeper saw the dark being used as a language for greed, and he refused to translate it.